So, are there any questions regarding this? I mean, this transfer of the course from me to Meghna? Any administrative, logistical questions you have? Okay, none. Any questions regarding? Sorry.
Will the
Yeah.
overall weightage still be the same? You mentioned that assignments will be 40% and then 30%, 30%, right? Would the same thing persist when Meghna is taking over?
Yeah. So, as Meghna said, she may change. She may make minor changes in the second half. So, what you can perhaps expect in that case is the first two assignments will probably still be worth 20% of your grade, assuming there are four assignments, and the midterm exam will be worth 30% of your grade. If Meghna makes any changes, then that will be related to the next assignments and the final exam. But as she said, there won't be any drastic changes. So for now, you can perhaps assume that there won't be any changes at all. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, if she really needs to make some changes, she will discuss that with you, and only if there is an agreement, then such a change will be implemented to the second half of the course. Okay, so think of the course as really being divided into two parts. Of course, the two parts are there is a continuity. Flows immediately continues to matchings. Um, but administratively and logistically, you can think of it as two half courses. Okay. All right. So, any questions regarding what we discussed in the last lecture? So, we discussed the Ford-Fulkerson algorithm, right? And the complexity of the Ford-Fulkerson algorithm is m times the order of m times the value of the maximum flow, right? So, if the maximum flow is a value 100, then depends on this value, right? Good. And why is that? Well, because in each step of the algorithm, you will increase the value of the flow by at least one, right? So this is assuming integer capacities. You will increase by at least one, and each time you have to find this ST incrementing, F incrementing ST path, and that requires breadth first search. And so that is where the M comes from. Okay. The problem is that it depends on this value, right? And ideally we would like a algorithm that does not depend on any parameter except the number of vertices and the number of edges, right? So let me give you an example to show why this is really achievable, why this worst case upper bound can be achieved. So here is the example. It's the what you can say is a standard example to show this. So consider this directed graph, this network, where I'm going to put a capacity of 1 on this arc and a capacity of 1000 on all the other arcs. Can anyone tell me what is the maximum flow? What is the maximum flow value? Sorry?
2000.
2000, exactly. Right? What you would do is you would send 1000 on all the arcs except this one, and this one you will just send 0, right? And it is fairly obvious in this example that this is the best you can do. You can also show that there is a minimum cut of 2000, and that's it, right? Well, you can take this cut, for example. This is 2000, and you have a flow of 2000. So that is the maximum flow and the minimum cut, right? But what's the problem? What can go wrong if you apply the Ford-Fulkerson algorithm? Can someone tell me what can go wrong here? Supposing I start with the flow 0, what kind of path would you give me to make sure that the algorithm does not terminate very quickly?
SABT.
Exactly. Take the path SABT. right? And you can augment on this path. You can push a flow of 1. So from 0, 0, 0, 0, you can go to 1, 1, 1, and keep 0 here. And now you can keep doing the same thing, right? You can keep increasing the flow on this path, right? Second.
So first you need the path SBAT.
SBAT. Yes, exactly. So once you do this, what you can do is you can take this path now, right? And you will again increase by 1. Now you can again go to SABT, you can again go to SBAT. So keep alternating between these two paths, SABT and SBAT. Okay? So this is the first path, this is the second path. Again you do SABT, again you do SBAT, and so on and so forth. And every time you will increase the flow by exactly 1, and in 2000 steps you will get the maximum flow, right? Is that clear? Are there any questions regarding this example? So this is the worst case behavior. Of the Ford-Fulkerson algorithm. Okay. So, well, because of this problem, people started thinking if there was some way to remove the dependence on this quantity. Is it somehow possible to remove the dependence on the value of the maximum flow? Because you see, if you chose the paths in a more intelligent way, in a smarter way, you would just choose SAT and then you would choose SBT, and you would get a flow of 1000 here, and you'll get a flow of 1000 again. So you'll get a flow of 2000, right? And this would be the best case behavior. Right? Okay. And turns out that there is a way to resolve this. It's called the Edmonds-Karp algorithm, and it was also due to Dinitz. Actually, Dinitz was the first one to do it in 1970, and Edmonds-Karp is 1972. There is a minor difference between their what they do, but I won't discuss that. What we will be discussing is actually Edmonds-Karp, but the difference is actually quite minor. So in some sense, Dinitz was the first one to remove the dependence on the on the value of the maximum flow. Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay. If not, then it's a very simple idea. It's a very simple idea, and that is the following. They said that rather than choosing an arbitrary incrementing ST path, F incrementing ST path, why don't we choose the shortest path? And that's it. That is the whole idea. Choose the shortest F incrementing ST path instead of an arbitrary F incrementing ST path. Okay? And that's it. If you implement just this small change in the Ford-Fulkerson algorithm, then it turns out that you can get rid of the dependence on the value of the maximum flow. The algorithm, actually, we will discuss it a little bit, but I will not present proofs, partly because Well, I'm still trying to figure out exactly all the details, and I think I'm just going to put them in the type notes. But what I will do is I will try to explain to you what the main points of the proof are, what the two main steps are, and basically what happens is you get a proof that is, you get an algorithm that is order m square n. Okay. And remember that Edmund Scarp, Ford Fulkerson was order m times the value of the flow, right? Okay. And how can you find shortest paths? Can someone tell me how you would find shortest f incrementing st path?
BFS.
Exactly. For finding a shortest f incrementing st path, you just need breadth first search. One may find a shortest f incrementing st path by using breadth first search on the auxiliary digraph, right? So we discussed the auxiliary digraph last time, right? And that's it. In fact, it's actually quite interesting because the history is quite interesting because most implementations of Ford Fulkerson algorithm were already using breadth first search when the algorithm was known, when it was discovered. But people did not know that this was actually terminating in polynomial time dependent only on m and n. So the best bound they knew at the time was this, but they noticed that the algorithm actually terminated very quickly because in most implementations on computer, they were actually using breadth first search. So it was finding the shortest path and the algorithm was terminating quicker than they expected it to in the worst case. But it was only in the 1970s that they understood why this was true, right? So in some sense, they were already using the better algorithm, but they just did not know how to prove it. So the credit for proving that goes to Dinitz and Edmund Scarp. So Dinitz is 70 and Edmund Scarp is 72. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is I want to tell you what the two main points are to prove this complexity of the Edmund Scarp algorithm. I'll keep saying Edmund Scarp because Dinitz actually gives a slightly different complexity, which is dependent on m and n, but not the same function. Okay. So maybe I'll start with an example. The same example as we saw before, but I will change it slightly. Okay. Maybe let me replace 1000 by 100. Okay. I'm going to make one change here. Maybe I won't call them A and B, V1 and V2. And let me put one more arc here, which is also 100. Okay. Good. So now let's say we choose the shortest. So we start with the flow 0 everywhere. We start with 0 everywhere. What is the shortest incrementing path? Can someone tell me what's the shortest path?
The arc ST.
Exactly, right? So this is the shortest path. And what I will do on this is I will increment by epsilon. Epsilon is 100. And so we will get a flow of value 100. So I'll just make the change here. Okay. So we get a flow of value 100. And now we construct the auxiliary graph. So this is the flow F1. And this is the graph DF1. Okay. So what is this? So everything will remain the same except for F1, it will become a reverse arc. Right? And everything else just stays as it is. Okay, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can anyone explain to me why this is a reverse arc? I'm going to call out a name. Let's see. Ritvik, are you there?
Yes, sir. So
Okay, so why is this a reverse arc?
reverse
Yeah,
because we can reduce the flow on this particular arc, but we can't increase it. So there's no forward
exactly.
edge.
Exactly. Thanks. Okay, good. So this is good. Now let's proceed from this flow. Can anyone now tell me what is the shortest path? In this flow, what is the shortest, or you can look at this directed graph actually. What is the shortest ST die path?
SUT or SVT.
Exactly. So let's pick one of them. Let's say I pick SUT. Okay. And I look at this path here. And I can increment by 100 on both of them. And I can get a new flow. Right? Okay. Right? And so my new flow is, I'm sending 100 here, 100 here, 100 here, and we are sending 0 everywhere else. Right? Okay. And now let's draw the auxiliary digraph here. So this is our flow F2. Okay. And now let's construct the digraph again, the auxiliary digraph. So this is still a reverse arc. These will now become reverse arcs. And this remains a forward arc. And these remain forward arcs. Is that correct? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, good. And now, well, I'll just do one more step because that is all we have to do. And now the shortest path is clear. There is only one shortest path, SVT. And so we again increment it on this one. Right? So we'll again increment on this path by 100 again. Oops, sorry. Okay. Right? And now our new flow is 100 on each arc except one arc. And this is 0, right? And this is the best you can do because you have a cut of capacity 300. Okay. So this is S, U, V, and T. Okay. And now what is the auxiliary digraph? So this is our flow F3, and this is the graph DF3. So this is going in the reverse. These are also now going to go in the reverse direction. These will go in the reverse direction as before. And this one is a forward arc. This one is as it was before, right? Okay. All good. And now the problem is in this graph, in this directed graph, there is no ST dipath, right? And in particular, that means that there is no F3 incrementing ST path in this network. Okay, good. So there are some things we want to observe. So let's make some observations. What is the distance between, what is the distance from S to T here? Actually, give me a second. So the distance between the two vertices, S and T, the shortest path is 2, right? So this is going to be the distance between S and T with respect to the flow F1. Okay? Here, again, it is 2. What is the distance here between S and T? Sorry, I meant to write it here. Distance between S and T with respect to flow F2 is again 2. And what is the distance here? There is no path, so we are going to say the distance is infinity. Okay? And there is one thing I forgot. I also wanted the flow F0. F0 is the zero flow. Okay? And the distance for this one, so I did not draw the graph here, is actually 1, right? Because we chose this path. So this was with respect to the zero flow. I did not draw the auxiliary digraph because the auxiliary digraph is the same as the original digraph, right? So notice what happens to the distance. The distance is increasing. At first you have 1, then you have distance 2 for twice, 2 times, and finally the distance is infinity, right? This is the first lemma, that when you choose the shortest paths, the distance will keep increasing. It can never decrease between the two vertices S and T. Okay? So let me put down the first lemma. Let's see. Lemma 1. For each vertex V in the directed graph D, the distance in the graph F prime with the flow F prime between S and T, actually it's not just true for S and T, it is actually true for any two vertices. So you can choose S and V, and that must increase between V and T. Also, it must be greater than or equal to than the original distance. Okay, so let me just put down the notation for this lemma. So we have a network N, and flow F for this network. And suppose that F prime is a new flow obtained by one iteration of the Edmonds-Karp algorithm. Right? In other words, to go from F to F prime, what you are doing is you are incrementing on a F incrementing ST path that is of shortest length. Okay, so this is really crucial. If you choose a shortest ST path, then what will happen is that the distance between the source and any vertex, right? So that vertex could be the target T, for example. And the distance between any vertex and the target will only go up. It cannot go down. Okay? And what is the maximum distance you can have between the source and the target if it is not infinity? What is the maximum distance you could have between two vertices if it is not infinity?
Number of edges.
Number of edges or vertices?
Vertices.
Right, because we are looking at paths, right? So it is going to be number of vertices, and that is where the N is coming from. Okay? Why? Good. So the distance, so if you know that the distance keeps increasing, then you would be done, right? Then it's great, because then it will take exactly N steps. After that, the distance will become infinity, because at some point you will find a maximum flow and there will be no ST incrementing path, which means eventually the distance has to become infinity, which means there is no path, right? But if it keeps increasing at each step, then you would just take N steps and each step takes M, and so you're done. The problem is there are cases where the distance does not increase, right? Here we saw that the distance was 2, and once again the distance is 2, right? So this does not give us an upper bound, because here we have a greater than equal to rather than just a greater than. Is that clear? We need something more than just this lemma. Okay, so we need to get an upper bound on how many times you can have the same distance between S and T. And if you get an upper bound on the number of times you can have the same distance, then you would have an upper bound on the total number of iterations. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, so that is what the next lemma's content is. Okay, so we need one more notation. Okay, let's see. So one more notation that we need is the following. So this is going to refer to the original directed graph. What we are going to do is we are going to look at all the arcs that can be part of a shortest incrementing path, of a shortest F incrementing ST path. Okay. For any flow F, let's see, I will use the notation Z. Z of F is the set of all arcs that are contained, that participate in some shortest f incrementing st path. Okay, so let me show you what this set is in our example. Okay, so let's go through this example. Let's look at f0. So f0 is the zero flow, and in the zero flow, the only shortest path is actually the direct edge from S to T, right? So the only arc is actually ST. Okay, because this is the only arc that participates in on any shortest incrementing path. Okay, what about F1? Can someone tell me what Z of F1 is? F1 is the flow where we are sending 100 on this arc. What are the arcs that participate in a shortest incrementing path with respect to this flow?
SUT, SVT.
SU?
T, SVT.
Okay, so SU, UT, SV, and VT. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks. So this is ZF1 because this is the shortest path, but notice that this is also a shortest path. So all of these four arcs participate in some shortest incrementing path. Right? Okay. What about ZF2? So now we are sending 100 on this arc, S to T, and we are sending 100 on these two arcs, SU and UT. And our directed graph is this one. What are the arcs in this case? And I'm going to call out someone. Srinam, are you there? Yes. So what is ZF2? Can you tell me? What is ZF2? SV, okay, and VT, exactly, right? So we have exactly two edges here. Notice that the previous two SU and U2, they are no longer in this set, right? Good. And finally, let's look at ZF3, although I don't think I need ZF3 so much. Oh, ZF3 is what? Can anyone tell me what ZF3 is? Let's see. Vamsi, are you there? Vamsi? Okay. Pranav, are you there? Anyone else? What is ZF3?
Null set, sir. Null.
Sorry? Phi, empty set. ZF3 is the empty set because there is no ST die path, right? Okay. The part I want you to notice on, remember, there were two cases where the distance did not change. F1 and F2. The distance did not change here, but something else changes. The Z set is changing. You all agree? The distance did not change, but the Z set is changing. And that is our next lemma. The Z set will always be a subset of the previous Z set. Okay? If the distance in F prime with respect to between S and T is the same as the distance in F between the two vertices, then the Z set corresponding to F prime is a proper subset of the Z set corresponding to F. Okay? And what this means is that, well, I did not prove it, sorry. What this means is that you can have at most, how many steps can there be with a certain distance? For a fixed constant k. Can someone tell me? How many steps can we have at a fixed distance between S and T? Anyone?
M.
M, right? And here, because we are dealing with directed graphs, M is the number of arcs in the network, right? So this is the number of arcs in the directed graph. Okay. So we can have at most M steps with distance K. The total number of changes in distance can be at most N. And that, if you combine those two things, then you get order Mn. So you get a total of wow, I can't spell today. You get a total of order M times N incrementations.
Sir, what do you mean by at most m steps with distance? STK.
Right. So for a fixed distance, let's go back to our example. The distance between the two vertices did not change, right? Here, in this step and in this one, right? So what I'm saying is that there can be, for a fixed distance, let's say 2, you can have at most the number of arc times incrementations, right? So in every incrementation, the distance has to be less than equal to the previous distance. You agree? The distance is always, sorry, greater than equal to. If you have 2 here, you could have either 2 here or 3 here. But if it remains 2, then the question is how many times can it remain the same number? And that is the number of arcs in the graph.
Okay, got it, got it.
Right? Because you're always going to get a proper subset of the previous set. Right? So this is the reason. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Right? Okay. So you can have total of order M times N incrementations, and each step takes order of M time, because we have already discussed breadth first search. And so that gives us a complexity of order M square N. Right? So my main point today was to explain the content of these two lemmas using this example. Right? So all we have done today is we have seen this particular example, and in this example, I want you to notice that both of these lemmas are illustrated because the proofs have a lot of notation. So before we go to the proof, I just want to make it clear what these two lemmas mean. And in the next lecture, we will go through the proof of these two lemmas. Okay, so that is tomorrow. Are there any questions of what these two lemmas are saying and why the conclusion we arrive at because of these two lemmas? Shefali, you had a question?
Yes, actually, which was flow zero. I missed that.
Oh, flow zero is basically, I did not write it down. So flow zero is when you put a 0 on every arc. F of
Okay,
A
okay,
equal to
okay.
0 for each arc.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in this case, the auxiliary graph df0 is the same as the original directed graph. Is that clear? Do you see why it is
Yes.
the same? Right. Okay.
Yes.
So I did not draw the auxiliary digraph, but it's the original digraph itself. Right? Any other questions? The main point for today is to understand the meaning of these two lemmas. What is the content of these two lemmas? Right? There is a lot of notation, and we will prove these two lemmas in the next lecture. and they are not that trivial. I have actually been struggling all weekend wrapping my head around their proofs because this is not something I specialize in. I think part of the problem is that there is a lot of notation in the proofs. So wrapping your head around that much notation can be non-trivial. Any other questions? Is it clear why these two lemmas give us the complexity, order m square n?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just an administrative question. When
Yes.
is the mid-semester exam?
6th November.
Okay, so
I
Meghna ma'am
will-
will be conducting that.
Right, in the sense that I won't be here, but I will be responsible for many things regarding the midsem exam. So
Okay.
yeah, it will be administered by Meghna. That's right.
All right. Thanks.
But it's the same, right? You'll give us 72 hours and we'll submit on 9th November.
That's right. 72 hours. Yes.
And sir, one more question. By when do you plan to release the type notes for this part?
That's a good point. Who is it again? I couldn't see.
Anshut, sir.
Okay, Achyut, yes. Yeah. I have been struggling to complete the type notes. What I might do is I might release one version of the type notes by tonight or tomorrow night.
Okay, sir.
And if I'm not happy with this version, I might update it later. So I will try my best to release some version by tomorrow night.
Okay.
Okay.
Sir. Thank you.
So at least what I will try to do is whatever is required for the assignment, in the sense that what are the particular statements. So in the assignment, I say you need to prove the global edge version of Menger's theorem. So I will make sure that the type notes that I put out tomorrow will contain all of these statements in case you were not able to note them down during lectures. But they are already there in the lecture notes and in the videos which are available on YouTube. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? Right, so for tomorrow, make sure that you follow the statements of these two lemmas, because tomorrow we'll be proving them, right? So make sure that you have a good grip on what these two lemmas mean. Maybe even work out a few examples on your own to see what these concepts are, the distance and the Z set. Okay? Any other
Thank
questions,
you.
concerns? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.